The year was 2847, and humanity was losing the war. Commander Lisa Monroe stood on the bridge of her ship, the USS Defiant. She was 43 years old, with tired eyes and gray streaks in her dark hair. She had been fighting for 5 years. She had watched friends die. She had seen entire worlds burn. And now, she was watching the end of everything she had ever known. The Varathi Dominion had come from the dark spaces between stars. Nobody knew where they came from or why they wanted to destroy everything in their path. They just did. Their ships were massive and powerful. Their weapons could crack planets. And they never stopped coming. 17 human colonies had fallen in 6 months. Earth's great fleet, once the pride of humanity, was now scattered and broken. Small groups of survivors hid in asteroid belts and abandoned stations, trying to stay alive for one more day. The Defiant was the last heavy cruiser still working in the Sol system. Her crew of 212 people moved quietly around the bridge, checking their stations and trying not to think about what was coming. Lieutenant Kevin Park was young, barely 25 years old. His job was to handle communications. His hands were shaking as he read the message on his screen. He looked up at Commander Monroe with fear in his eyes. "Ma'am," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "we just got the final order from High Command. All ships are ordered to retreat to the Kepler Sanctuary. They are abandoning Earth." The bridge went silent. Everyone stopped what they were doing. They all knew what this meant. The colony ships were preparing to leave. These massive vessels carried Earth's last 3 million survivors. They would jump to a hidden star system 2,000 light years away. They would start over. They would survive, but Earth itself, the home of all humanity, would be left behind to burn. Monroe felt her heart sink, but she kept her face calm. A commander could not show fear, even when fear was all she felt. How long until the Varathi fleet reaches Earth? She asked. Chief Tactical Officer Daniel Craig pulled up the information on his screen. He was a big man from the Mars colonies, with a weathered face that showed no emotion. 18 hours, Commander. Their front group has 47 warships, including 3 of their biggest ships, the Dreadnoughts. The main fleet of over 200 ships is 12 hours behind them. And how long do the colony ships need to escape? 22 hours. They need that much time to finish loading people and get far enough away to make the jump safely. Monroe did the math in her head. It was simple. It was terrible. The Varathi would catch the colony ships before they could escape. 3 million people, the last hope of humanity, would die in the cold darkness of space. She looked around her bridge at the men and women who had served with her through years of desperate fighting. Navigator Amy Collins was barely 25, a smart young woman who had joined the fleet to pay for her younger brother's education. Chief Engineer Samuel Torres was an older man who kept the Defiant running with spare parts and pure stubbornness. Dr. Patricia Lane was their medical officer, a kind woman who still wrote letters to her daughter on Mars. Even though the colony had been silent for months, these people deserved to live. They deserved to see whatever future humanity might build among distant stars. But someone had to buy time for the colony ships. Someone had to stand in the way of the Varathi fleet and slow them down. Someone had to sacrifice everything so that others could live. Monroe made her decision. "Open a channel to all ships in the sector," she said quietly. Park looked at her with confusion. "Commander?" "Do it, Lieutenant." The communication channel opened, and Monroe spoke words she had never imagined saying. "This is Commander Lisa Monroe of the USS Defiant. I am speaking to all surviving ships in the Sol sector. In 18 hours, the Varathi front fleet will reach Earth. In 22 hours, our colony ships will finish their escape. The math is clear. We are 4 hours short." She paused and took a deep breath. "The Defiant will not be going to Kepler. We will stay at the Mars corridor and fight the enemy fleet. Our goal is simple. By 4 hours. 4 hours for the colony ships. 4 hours for humanity's future. I am not ordering anyone to join us. This is volunteer only. We will not be coming home." She closed the channel and waited. For a long moment, nothing happened. Monroe wondered if she would be fighting alone. Then the first response came. "USS Horizon here. Crew of 47. We're with you, Defiant." Another voice followed. "This is the Relentless. We're damaged, running on half power. But we can still fight. Count us in." And another. "Starbound reporting. We're just a cargo ship with mining lasers. But we're not running away." One by one, the responses came. By the time the last message arrived, 19 ships had answered the call. 19 ships against 47 Varathi warships. It was not enough. Everyone knew it was not enough, but it was something. It was hope. On the colony ship Adelaide, far behind the front lines, a young girl named Sophie Park watched the communications feed with her mother. Sophie was Kevin Park's younger sister. She was only 12 years old, too young to understand everything that was happening, but old enough to know that her brother was not coming home. "Mom," she said quietly, "is Kevin going to be okay?" Her mother held her close and did not answer. Some questions had no good answers. Back on the Defiant, Monroe looked at her crew. They were scared. She could see it in their eyes. But they were also determined. They had made their choice. "All hands," she announced over the ship speakers. "Prepare for battle. We have 18 hours. Use them well. Write your letters. Say your prayers. Make peace with whatever you need to make peace with. And then get ready to fight harder than you have ever fought before." She sat down in her command chair and stared at the tactical display. The Varathi fleet was coming, a cloud of death moving through the darkness. 19 ships. 200 souls per ship on average. Against an enemy that had never been defeated. Monroe knew they would probably all die. But death was not the point. The point was to give humanity a chance. The point was to prove that humans did not give up, even when there was no hope left. The point was to make the enemy remember them. She closed her eyes and thought of Earth, the blue planet she had called home. She would never see it again. But maybe, someday, her sacrifice would mean that other humans could return. That was enough. That had to be enough. The clock began counting down. 18 hours until contact with the enemy. The last fleet was ready. The 19 ships of what would later be called the last fleet gathered in the shadow of Deimos, the smaller moon of Mars. They had 14 hours until the enemy arrived. "Commander," Monroe called a meeting with all the other captains. They joined through holographic links, their faces appearing like ghosts around the tactical table on the Defiance bridge. Monroe looked at each face and saw fear, but also something else. Something that looked like peace. These people had made their choice, and they were ready to see it through. Captain Nathan Brooks of the Horizon spoke first. He was a thin man in his 50s who had been fighting the Varathi since the very first contact. "I've sent our tactical information to all ships. The enemy formation is standard Varathi style. Their 3 biggest ships, the dreadnoughts, stay in the center. Cruisers surround them for protection. Destroyers guard the sides. What is their weakness?" Monroe asked. Captain Maria Santos of the Relentless answered. She was younger than Monroe, but her ship had taken more damage in the war than any other surviving vessel. The scars on her face showed that she had been in many close fights. Their weakness is arrogance. The Varathi do not understand sacrifice. In every battle we have fought, they retreat when they lose more than 15% of their ships. They conquer, they expand, they take what they want. But they have never faced an enemy willing to die. Chief Engineer Torres spoke up from his station. Commander, I have been studying their shield systems. If we can get close enough, really close, our weapons become much more effective against them. The problem is surviving long enough to get that close. What about the civilian ships? Asked Captain Howard Green of the Starbound. His vessel was a converted cargo hauler, not built for war. We don't have real weapons or armor. We're just freight carriers. You have engines, Monroe said. And you have courage. That will have to be enough. She pulled up the tactical display showing the path the Varathi would take. There was only one practical route to Earth through the asteroid belt. It was called the Mars Corridor, a clear path through the rocks that had been created centuries ago for safe travel. We are going to turn that corridor into a trap, Monroe explained. The Starbound and other civilian ships will spread sensor-blocking debris throughout the path. The enemy will have to slow down or risk crashing into things they cannot see. When they slow down, our warships will attack from hiding spots in the asteroid field. They will still have more than 2 ships for every one of ours, Brooks observed. Yes, but we do not need to win. We just need to make them bleed. Every minute they spend fighting us is another minute for the colony ships to escape. Dr. Patricia Lane had been silent during the meeting, but now she spoke. Commander, many of our crew members have families on those colony ships. Have you thought about letting people transfer? Those who want to live could have that chance. Monroe had thought about it. She had spent a sleepless night wrestling with the decision. Anyone who wants to transfer to a ship going to Kepler may do so, she announced. No questions asked. No judgment. Shuttles will leave in 2 hours. After that, we are committed to this fight. She expected many requests. Instead, she received only 7. 7 people out of nearly 3,000 across all the ships chose to leave. The rest stayed. When Monroe asked Lieutenant Park why he did not request a transfer, the young man simply shrugged. My sister Sophie is on the colony ship Adelaide. She's going to grow up in a new world, Commander. But she will know that her brother helped make that possible. That matters more to me than growing old. Monroe felt her throat tighten, but she kept her composure. Get back to your station, Lieutenant. We have work to do. The 14 hours passed in a blur of activity. Crews loaded weapons and checked every system on their ships. Engineers made repairs that should have taken weeks in just a few hours. People recorded final messages for their loved ones, trying to find the right words to say goodbye. The Defiant small chapel, which had been empty for months, suddenly had a line of people waiting to enter. The mess hall ran out of the good coffee, but nobody complained. Small luxuries did not matter anymore. Monroe made a final walk through her ship. She wanted to see every section, every crew member, one last time. In engineering, Torres and his team worked on failing systems with tools and determination. The old engineer looked up when she entered and gave her a tired smile. She hold together, Commander. I promise you that. In the medical bay, Dr. Lane was preparing for the wounded they all knew were coming. She had laid out every piece of equipment, organized every medicine, made everything ready. I'll keep them alive as long as I can, she said. That's all any of us can do. In the fighter bay, the squadron's 18 remaining pilots were checking their small attack craft. Squadron leader Christopher Webb walked over to greet her. He was 29 years old, with the easy confidence of someone born to fly. Commander, my pilots wanted me to tell you something. What's that? We're not scared. We're angry. The Varathi took our homes, our families, our futures. Today, we take something back from them. Monroe nodded. Give them hell, Lieutenant. That's the plan, ma'am. She returned to the bridge as the clock counted down to contact with the enemy. The tactical display showed the Varathi fleet approaching. 47 ships spread across the darkness like a wall of death. All ships report they are ready, Park announced. Enemy fleet is slowing down, Craig reported. They have detected our debris field. They are reducing speed to navigate safely. The plan was working. Every minute of delay was precious. Send a final message to the colony fleet, Monroe ordered. Tell them we are buying them time. Tell them to remember what was given here today. She settled into her command chair and watched the enemy approach. Her heart was beating fast, but her hands were steady. This was what she had trained for her entire life. Not victory, but sacrifice. Not glory, but duty. All hands, she announced over the ship's speakers. This is the commander. The enemy is almost here. In a few hours, we will fight them. Many of us will not survive. But today, we fight for every man, woman, and child who will carry humanity forward to the stars. Today, we prove that humans do not go quietly into the night. She paused, looking at the faces of her crew. They were ready. Today, we make them remember us forever. All ships, prepare for battle. The first Varathi destroyer crossed into weapons range. The storm was about to break. The first shots of the battle were fired by the fighter squadron from the Defiant, Christopher. Webb led his 18 small attack craft through the asteroid field at speeds that would have been dangerous under normal conditions. But normal had died months ago. Webb's pilots flew with the skill of people who had accepted their fate and had nothing left to fear. They came out from behind a giant spinning rock and fell upon the Varathi, screaming destroyers like wolves attacking sheep. The enemy ships were designed for big fleet battles. They had no plan for dealing with small fighters piloted by humans who seemed almost eager to die. Missiles away, Webb called out as he released his full weapons load into a destroyer's side. The enemy shields flickered and failed under the attack. Behind him, his wingmen followed with precise cannon fire that tore through the exposed hull. The Varathi destroyer, Sovereign, broke apart in a ball of orange fire. First kill confirmed, Webb reported to the Defiant. Moving to next targets. On the bridge of the Defiant, Monroe watched her pilots dance with death. They were beautiful to watch. They were also doomed, and she knew it. The enemy dreadnoughts are pushing forward, Craig reported from his tactical station. They are coming through the debris field even though it is damaging their smaller ships. They are learning, Monroe said. They cannot afford to be careful. Open fire with main weapons. Target the lead dreadnought. The Defiant's weapons fired, and beams of bright energy crossed the empty space between ships. The dreadnought's shields glowed as they absorbed the attack. The shots did little damage, but they accomplished their real purpose. Now the enemy knew exactly where the human flagship was hiding. All ships. Begin Phase 2, Monroe ordered. The 19 ships of the last fleet emerged from their hiding spots throughout the asteroid field. They attacked from every direction at once, creating chaos in the Varathi formation. The enemy had expected to chase a few fleeing survivors. Instead, they found themselves surrounded by humans who fought like trapped animals. Captain Santos pushed the damaged Relentless directly into the middle of the enemy formation. Her ship was already wounded from earlier battles, but somehow it was still moving at combat speed. She targeted a cruiser's engines and poured fire into them until the enemy ship went dark and started drifting. Then she found another target. And another. Relentless, pull back. Monroe ordered over the radio. You are taking too much damage. Negative, Defiant, Santos replied. Her voice was calm, even though alarms were screaming on her bridge. We came here to fight. So we are fighting. The battle became a swirling mess that no tactical instructor would have approved of. Ships wove between asteroids, using the giant rocks as shields against enemy fire. Fighters attacked capital ships. The civilian vessels used their powerful engines to push asteroids directly into the path of advancing Varathi warships. Captain Green's Starbound was not built for combat, but its mining lasers designed to cut through rock, turned out to be surprisingly effective against weakened shields. Green positioned his ship behind a large asteroid and simply waited, striking at any enemy vessel that came within range. 2 hours into the battle, the last fleet had destroyed 9 enemy ships and damaged many more. But they had paid a terrible price for every kill. The patrol ship Swift was the first to fall. It was caught between 2 cruisers and torn apart in seconds. The destroyer Lightning followed when a dreadnought's main weapon found its engine room. The converted passenger liner Hope's Light crashed itself into a Vorathi cruiser rather than be captured. Both ships disappeared in a massive explosion. "Commander, we are down to 14 ships," Park reported. His voice was cracking with emotion. "The enemy fleet is regrouping. They are bringing all 3 dreadnoughts forward together." Monroe studied the tactical display. The Vorathi were done playing games. They were going to punch through the human line with overwhelming force, regardless of losses. How long since the battle started? 3 hours and 7 minutes. They needed 53 more minutes. Less than an hour stood between humanity and extinction. "All ships, fall back to Rally Point Echo," Monroe ordered. "We will make them work for every meter of space." The retreat was organized, not a panicked flight. The last fleet fell back step by step, still firing, still taking enemy ships with them whenever possible. The asteroid field that had been their friend now became a maze of running battles, surprise attacks, and desperate last stands. The horizon took a killing blow while protecting the Defiant side. Captain Brooks's last words over the radio were simple: "Forward." His dying ship turned and drove itself into the nearest Vorathi cruiser at maximum speed. The Relentless finally died protecting a group of civilian ships. Its shields failed as it absorbed fire meant for others. Captain Santos never stopped giving orders, even as her bridge burned around her. One by one, the ships of the last fleet gave their lives. One by one, the minutes passed. In the fighter bay of the Defiant, only 7 pilots remained alive. Christopher Webb gathered them for one final meeting. "The Defiant cannot last much longer," he said. "When she falls, we will cover her as long as we can. Then we are going to make sure the enemy never forgets us." A young pilot named Andrea Marsh raised her hand. She was barely 22, fresh from training. "Sir, what if we don't care about being remembered? What if we just want to hurt them?" Webb smiled. Though his eyes were wet with tears, he would not let fall. "That works too, Marsh. That works just fine." On the bridge, Monroe watched the tactical display with hollow eyes. 8 ships remained. 8 ships against 29 Vorathi warships. They had bought 3 hours and 41 minutes. They needed 19 more. "Commander," Torres's voice came over the intercom from engineering. "Engine 3 is gone. We have maybe 60% thrust left. I can give you 30 more minutes of combat operations, maybe less." "Understood, Chief. Do what you can." The Vorathi fleet had reformed into a spear shape. 3 dreadnoughts led the way. Cruisers close behind. They were coming to end this. "All remaining ships," Monroe broadcast, "form up around the Defiant. We meet them head-on." The surviving vessels gathered around the flagship, forming a wall of defiance against impossible odds. And then, a message arrived from the colony fleet far behind them. "Last fleet, this is colony ship Adelaide. All evacuation ships have jumped to safety. Humanity is safe. Thank you. Thank you for everything." Monroe felt tears streaming down her face. Around her, the bridge crew cheered and cried at the same time. They had done it. Against all odds, against every calculation and every logical prediction, they had given humanity the time it needed. 3 million people were safe. The future was secure. "Well then," Monroe said quietly, wiping her eyes, "let's show them how humans die." The battle lasted another 47 minutes. The Defiant fought like a wounded animal refusing to die. Her crew performed miracles, keeping the ship moving and fighting long past the point where it should have been possible. They squeezed every last bit of power from failing systems and made every shot count. Torres kept the engines running through pure determination, physically holding together parts that should have broken hours ago. Dr. Lane treated wounds in hallways because the medical bay had been destroyed. Craig targeted enemy ships with impossible accuracy, making their limited ammunition do maximum damage, and Monroe commanded. She commanded as she had always commanded, with calm authority and complete trust in her people. The Defiant destroyed 3 more enemy ships before her weapons finally stopped working. She crippled 2 others by crashing into them, sacrificing pieces of her hull to damage the enemy. And when she finally died, breaking apart under concentrated fire from the remaining Vorathi fleet. She died on her own terms. In her final moments, Monroe sent one last message to the colony fleet. This is Commander Lisa Monroe of the USS Defiant. Our ship is lost, but we have completed our mission. 25 enemy ships destroyed, their fleet broken, their spirit shattered. The colony ships are safe. We were the last fleet. We were farmers and engineers and doctors and pilots. We were parents and children. We were scared, but we did not run. Remember us. Not as heroes, but as what humanity can be when we choose to fight for something greater than ourselves. We were just ordinary people who decided that some things are worth dying for. Tell our story. And when the next threat comes, remember that humans do not go quietly into the night. Defiant out. The transmission ended. The Defiant's power core exploded. The ship disappeared in a final flash of light. In the darkness of space, 15 Vorathi warships hung motionless. They were too damaged to continue, too shaken to move forward. Slowly, they turned around and began the long journey home. They did not chase the colony ships. They never would. 3 weeks later, the Adelaide and her sister vessels arrived at the Kepler system. 3 million humans stepped onto a new world under alien stars. They blinked in the light of an unfamiliar sun and breathed air that smelled different from anything they had known. They were alive. They were safe. And they would never forget the price that had been paid for their survival. In the years that followed, they built cities. They raised families. They created a new civilization far from the ashes of Earth. They called their new home New Terra, and it grew into something beautiful. Every year, on the anniversary of the battle, the people of New Terra gathered in every city and town. They played Monroe's final transmission over public speakers. They spoke the names of every ship that had fought that day. They told the story of how 19 ships and their crews had chosen death so that millions could live. Monuments were built in every major city. Songs were written that brought tears to the eyes of those who heard them. Children were given the names of pilots and engineers and ordinary crew members who had become legends. On the colony ship Adelaide, Sophie Park grew up knowing exactly what her brother Kevin had done. She became a teacher and spent her life making sure that every child on New Terra learned the story of the last fleet. She never married, never had children of her own. She said her family was every student she ever taught. She lived to be 93 years old. Her last words were her brother's name. Far across the galaxy, in the halls of the Vorathi Dominion, a report was filed that would change everything. The report described a species that could not be conquered. A species that fought without any hope of survival. A species that turned defeat into victory through pure refusal to give up. The Dominion had conquered hundreds of worlds. They had never failed to take what they wanted. But for the first time in their history, they drew a line on their maps. A region of space marked with a simple note: human territory. Do not enter. It was not respect, exactly. The Vorathi did not respect other species. But it was fear. They had learned that some enemies were simply not worth the cost of fighting. Stories spread throughout Varethi space. Stories of ships that would not stop attacking, of humans who charged into certain death while laughing, of a species that frightened the conquerors. Other conquered peoples heard these stories. They began to whisper among themselves. They began to wonder if they too could resist, if they too could fight back. The last fleet won more than a battle that day. They planted seeds of rebellion across an entire empire. 50 years after the battle, the children of the last fleet's crew had children of their own. Those children built new ships. They trained new pilots. They developed new weapons. And they prepared. Because humanity had learned something important in the fire of that desperate fight. The galaxy was not safe. Survival required strength. But most importantly, when humans stand together and fight for something greater than themselves, they can achieve miracles. The Varethi learned this lesson too, in their own way. In their military academies, they studied the Battle of the Last Fleet as a warning. They taught their officers to recognize the signs of an enemy willing to die rather than surrender. They never found another species like that. Humans, they concluded, were unique and uniquely dangerous. 200 years after the battle, humanity returned to Earth. They came in ships far more advanced than anything the last fleet had possessed. They found the old world damaged but not destroyed. The Varethi had never landed there. They had been too afraid. Some places, they had learned, belonged to humans. And humans never forgot. They never forgave. And they never, ever gave up. On a hill overlooking the ruins of what had once been New York City, the returning humans built a memorial. It was a simple thing, just a wall of black stone with names carved into it. 219 names. The crew of the last fleet dotted the top of the wall. They carved the words that Commander Lisa Monroe had spoken in her final transmission. Remember us. Not as heroes, but as what humanity can be when we choose to fight for something greater than ourselves. Below that, they added one more line. They knew they would never return. They went anyway. Every year after that, on the anniversary of the battle, humans gathered at that memorial. They came from New Terra, from Earth, from dozens of other worlds that humanity had settled across the stars. They came to remember. They came to promise that the sacrifice of the last fleet would never be forgotten. And somewhere in the endless darkness between stars, the spirits of 19 ships and their crews finally found peace. They had given everything, and everything had been enough. Humanity survived. Humanity thrived. Humanity remembered. That was their victory. That was their legacy. That was the story of the humans who knew they would never return, but chose to go down fighting anyway. The end. The Varethi did not understand what they were seeing. Their officers reported that the human ships were moving toward them, not away. The surviving fighters had launched and were forming up for another attack. The damaged, outnumbered, clearly beaten human fleet was charging forward. Supreme Commander Kethrix of the Varethi Dominion had conquered 17 worlds. He had destroyed dozens of species. He had never seen anything like this. Explain this, he demanded from his tactical officer. We cannot explain it, Supreme Commander. The humans cannot win this fight. Normal behavior would be to surrender or run away. They are doing neither. That is correct, Supreme Commander. Kethrix studied the approaching human ships with something close to curiosity. The Varethi had met many species during their expansion across the galaxy. Some had fought briefly before giving up. Others had tried to make deals. A few had tried to escape. None had ever done this. Open communication with them, Kethrix ordered. I wish to speak to their leader. On the Defiant, Lieutenant Park looked up in surprise. Commander, the enemy flagship is calling us. They want to talk. Monroe thought about refusing, but curiosity made her accept. The image of Kethrix appeared on the bridge. He was tall, with grayish-blue skin and strange eyes that seemed to absorb light instead of reflecting it. "Human Commander," Kethrix said, "your colony ships have escaped. Your mission is finished. Yet you continue to attack. Explain this behavior to me." Monroe stood before the alien image. She was covered in dust and dry blood, exhausted beyond measure, but she stood tall and straight. "We are not attacking because we think we can win. We are attacking because you killed our people. You burned our worlds. You destroyed our future. You took everything from us, and so you choose to die? We choose to make you remember us. Every ship you lose today, every soldier who dies, every hour you spend fighting us instead of chasing the colony ships is our victory. You think you have conquered humanity. You have not. You have just made us very, very angry." Kethrix was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice held something that might have been respect. "You could surrender. The Dominion takes prisoners. We have seen what you do with prisoners. We have seen your labor camps, the experiments, the slow death you give to those who submit." Monroe's voice was as cold as space itself. "We choose our own death on our own terms, and we choose to take as many of you with us as we can. This is not logical behavior. No, it is human." She cut the communication channel. "All ships," she broadcast. "Maximum attack. No retreat. No surrender. Make them pay for every centimeter." The final charge of the last fleet began. The Defiant led the way, her remaining weapons firing continuously. Behind her, the 7 surviving ships followed, each one targeting a different enemy vessel. The fighter squadron, down to only 6 small craft, dove straight into the heart of the Varathi formation. What followed was not really a battle. It was a statement. It was a message written in fire and blood. The escort destroyer Valor died while protecting the Defiant from a dreadnought's main weapon. Its captain, Lieutenant Commander Kyle Bennett, turned his dying ship and crashed it into the dreadnought's command tower. The explosion was massive. The frigate Steadfast fought 3 cruisers at the same time. It destroyed one and badly damaged another before being overwhelmed. Captain Janet Perry's last words were a message to her wife on the colony ships. "I kept my promise. I kept you safe." The converted ore hauler Mountain's Pride had no weapons that could threaten a real warship. So Captain Frank Morrison flew his ship directly into a dreadnought's landing bay and set off all his mining explosives at once. The explosion ripped the massive enemy ship apart from the inside. One by one, the ships of the last fleet met their end. And one by one, they took their enemies with them. Christopher Webb led his final attack against the Varathi flagship itself. His fighter was hit 3 times during the approach, but he held his course steady. At the last moment, he fired his missiles directly into the flagship's shield generators and pulled away hard. The shields failed. The flagship was exposed. "Defiant," Webb called out. "Her shields are down. Take the shot now." Monroe did not hesitate. "All batteries, target the enemy flagship. Fire everything." The Defiant's remaining weapons fired together. The concentrated blast struck the unprotected dreadnought and tore through its hull. Explosions rippled across the giant ship as critical systems failed one after another. Kethrix's flagship, the pride of the Varathi invasion fleet, broke apart in the cold emptiness of Space Dot, but victory came at a cost. Webb's damaged fighter drifted into the path of defensive fire from a nearby cruiser. The young pilot's last transmission was a single word: worth it. The Defiant was alone now. Every other ship in the last fleet had fallen. Her hull was broken in 17 places. Her engines were failing. Her weapons were nearly empty, but she was still fighting. "Enemy fleet status?" Monroe asked. 19 ships remaining, Craig reported. We have destroyed or crippled 28 of their vessels. 28 enemy ships destroyed. Against 19 human vessels that were never supposed to win. It was impossible. It was beautiful. Commander, Park said quietly, the enemy ships have stopped. They are not advancing. Monroe looked at the display. The Varathi had stopped moving. Their remaining ships hung in space, weapons ready but not firing. They are afraid, she realized. We actually scared them. The communication system crackled. A new voice spoke, not Kethric's. Human vessel. This is Subcommander Velith. I now command the Varathi forces. Your resistance has been noted. We offer terms. Monroe laughed. It was not a happy sound. Terms? You are offering us terms? Leave this system. Go away. We will not chase your colony ships. You expect us to trust that promise? We have never met a species willing to die as you have died today. We do not understand this, but we recognize it as something significant. There is no profit in chasing beings who fight this way. Take your damaged ship and go. Tell your colony ships they are safe. We will not follow them. Monroe looked around her bridge. Torres had come up from engineering, his face black with smoke. Dr. Lane was there too. Park, Craig, and a handful of surviving crew members watched her with exhausted eyes. What did we think? She asked. Do we trust them? No, Torres said immediately. Never, Lane agreed. But, Park said slowly, we are not finished yet. We can still fight. And if we are still fighting, we are still buying time. Monroe nodded slowly. Sub-Commander Velith. We will continue to fight until our ship is destroyed. Every minute you spend killing us is another minute our people escape. Every ship you lose to us is one fewer ship that might threaten them someday. This is not logical, Velith said. No, it is human. We do not stop. We do not surrender. We do not give up, even when we have already won. Because for us, it was never about winning. It was about making sure you never forget what humans can do when we have nothing left to lose. She cut the channel. All hands. One more fight ahead of us. Make it count. The Defiant moved forward, alone against 19 warships. And the Varathi, for the first time in their history of conquest, felt something they had never felt before: fear.